Formula One on ITV, sponsored by Toyota.
It's race day at Interlagos, Sao Paulo, and the Brazilians are primed for a party. Their man Rubinho, Rubens Barrichello, is very much at home in pole position. Hello there, good afternoon. Well, perfect conditions for Barrichello in qualifying. What a total contrast, though, this afternoon. Just take a look at the conditions a couple of hours ago. I know it's boat race day, but this is absolutely ridiculous. Interlagos, between the lakes, that means, and the circuit turned into one huge river. It has been declared a wet race. The race is on at the moment, and the tyres are the real big problem. No full wet tyres are available. We're expecting the race to start behind the safety car. Of course, we will keep you posted. Well, racing in Brazil has been tough for Rubens Barrichello. He was expected to match the triumphs of Ayrton Senna before he was ready. That torrent of national fervour was overwhelming. Barrichello's retired from every Brazilian Grand Prix since 1993, but this afternoon he's qualified on pole for the very first time. Ted Kravitz reporting.
The early pace was set by Renault, but their underpowered engine would ensure no repeat of their Malaysian 1-2. Williams made good use of their new car parts to set 6th and 9th on heavy fuel. Ralf Schumacher back on form after a dodgy start to the season.
Well, it's getting there still. Due to understeer, I lost quite a bit in turn 4, but in general, you know, being first time back in the front, it's quite good, yeah.
Kimi Raikkonen had a fright when an engine problem appeared, but Mercedes patched it up and he finished 4th. McLaren's rich run of form continues. Coulthard's front row spot impressed the boss, if not the driver.
Had we had the old qualifying system, I could have gone out and gone a bit quicker, but we only get the one lap, so I can't be too disappointed with that.
David was almost beaten by Jaguar's Mark Webber. Third on the grid left the Aussie almost speechless.
Just amazing to be to where we are, and you know, we're on a two-stopper. We've you know, even if we're a little bit early on fuel, in some cases, you know, it's only a couple of tenths, so we are competitive here. It's good for us.
Michael Schumacher's Ferrari was a right handful. 7th place, the end result. Not that that concerns the world champion.
I think nothing is lost. I predicted a tough race here, and it's going to be a tough race, but nothing is lost.
But the day belonged to Rubens Barrichello, pole position in his backyard. But all the credit went to the most successful Ferrari in history.
I hope we give it a good try for this car that gave me so much of a good influence. I mean, this 2002 car is so good, and I hope we can finish on a high, and I hope I can win the race for the car.
Tony Jardine with me in our London studio. Now, Tony, all this expense for Formula One, millions and millions of pounds, how can they go to Brazil without suitable wet tyres?
You've just said it, all this expense. It was part of a cost-cutting measure which the teams actually voted for, and it was pushed through by the team's bosses, including Ron Dennis, that they'd have one make of wet weather tyre. Then the teams decide together with the tyre companies which type to bring, and they've brought Inters for Interlagos, knowing that in 93, 96, 2001 there'd been wet races, and you know when it rains there, it pours, as we've seen.
Absolutely. Well, as the storm was raging, Formula One Supremo Bernie Eccleston spoke to Louise Goodman.
Just open here in Brazil. What is the situation if we've still got these conditions for the start of the race?
Well, we'll have to have a look, because it seems they've brought the wrong tyres, they haven't brought wet tyres, they brought an intermediate, and even if it's behind the pace car, I think it'd be dangerous for them to run round. I mean, we've never done this, we've never postponed a race, but maybe we'd have to give it some thought.
That was a couple of hours ago. Let's go live now to Interlagos and to Louise Goodman. Lou, you're dressed for January in Britain, aren't you?
No, you're not wrong there, Jim. I mean, the rain has eased off. As you can see, it is still spitting. Charlie Whiting has just been out for a lap around the circuit in the safety car to have a look at the conditions. There is a lot of standing water down at the bottom of the track. Now, the big question everyone's asking is, are we going to start behind the safety car? The teams are going to be paying close attention to those orange lights on the top of the car. The way that Charlie will signify whether we are starting behind that car is by turning those lights on. He can do that 5 minutes before the start of the parade lap. He can leave it as late as 1 minute before the start of the parade lap. But I think the general consensus amongst the team, certainly everybody I've spoken to, is that we will definitely be starting behind the safety car.
Goodman, thank you very much indeed. There's always that tricky uphill start at Interlagos. Let me just tell you about the grid then. Barrichello, as we've been telling you, on pole. David Coulthard on the front row for the first time since his win at Monaco last year. Third, a career best for Webber and for the Jaguar team. Ralf Schumacher ahead of Michael. Now, Michael Schumacher hasn't been back there for 68 races. Fisichella putting a Jordan in the top 10 for the first time this season. It's their 200th race as well. Jenson Button out-qualifying teammate Villeneuve. 16th is Ralph Furman's best yet, and Justin Wilson is on the back row. Well, let's drive Interlagos in the dry. The track's been resurfaced. The drivers, though, say those bumps remain, that uphill start before you sweep down through the Senaresses, then a testing middle section before the flat-out finish. We're going to hitch a ride with Martin Brundle. He's on board Barrichello's Ferrari.
2.7 miles then of undulations into turn 1, 190 miles an hour. The Senna S, bring it in nice and early. Be prepared for 2. Just a slight lift of the throttle, you're immediately into the Curva do Sol. This is just an acceleration zone down the short back straight, up to about 180 miles an hour. Brake very, very late for 4. Turn in early, it falls away from you on the exit. Ride the curb gently. 5's easy in the dry, difficult in the wet. Now Ferradura, 165 miles an hour. Bring it in early, clip the curb for a second time as you go over the crest, and immediately ahead of you, Laranja. Bring it in, muller the curves, squirt the throttle down into Pinerino. Hesitate, now straighten the car, push the throttle, brake in a straight line as you go into this tiny little clumsy right-hander. Megullo ahead of you now. Let's see what he does through here. Slight lift of the throttle. Now in the foot of the hill, the car compresses before you head up to Juncao. Very important corner now as you push the throttle hard. Nothing more for the driver to do now except gently turn left and coax the car onto the pit straight. Cut the corners where you can. Over the start-finish line anytime soon. Pole position for Rubens Barrichello.
Much wetter conditions for Rubens Barrichello today, but his fans, those Paulistas, expect him to win. As for the rookie British driver Justin Wilson, well, he's happy to be racing at all this weekend as we take a look at Nick Heidfeld. You remember, we left Wilson a fortnight ago in Malaysia, exhausted and needing hospital treatment. He recovered quickly and was soon back at school. Louise explains.
It's 4 days since the Malaysian race, and most of the Formula One drivers are either testing or taking some time out with their families. No such luxury for Justin Wilson, though. When he's not working at a Grand Prix, he goes back to the day job.
I'm going to give you a bit of a briefing about what you're going to do.
Go, go. Justin, you're a Grand Prix star. What are you doing driving people around a racing track in Bedfordshire?
This is my day job. Do this about, up to 2 times a week this year, but in the past I've done it 4 or 5 times every week. I need money to live on, so I earn my salary by working here. All the money I get from sponsorship or the investment goes into paying for the drive, and I have to earn a living somehow.
You must need to have nerves of steel sometimes, don't you?
Yes, sometimes it's quite an interesting ride, but it changes so often. You get a lot of people who are a bit nervous, and it's really encouraging to see them build their confidence with you, so it's quite satisfying. But as you say, there's sometimes when you've got to just hang on. But you still learn, even from the passenger seat, you get to learn what a car's capable of in different situations. To have this opportunity to just sit next to people who are going that bit too much over the limit is quite educational.
Is there one particular car that you like instructing in the most?
If I had to choose one, I guess I'd choose the Evo, just because you get to be a bit of a hooligan in that one.
Don't know what you mean. Can't imagine that myself.
No, it's quite interesting.
What about the caterings? You look like you were having fun in those. I like your little trick.
Yeah, they're good fun. Very light, nimble little car, so again, you get to play with it, and when you wet the surface like that, it's quite a delicate operation, so it's good fun.
I mean, it's not all work, is it, though? I mean, you met your girlfriend Esther here, didn't you?
Yeah, I met her here. Got on very well and been going out for 3 years now.
What does she think of you making your Grand Prix debut?
She thinks it's fantastic. She's always been interested in motorsport, and she started working here after being around all the national racetracks and meetings, so yeah, she loves it as much as I do.
Have the other drivers reacted to you differently?
No, they're just the same. Some of them joke when you turn up in the morning saying, oh, well, your cars are ready and everything's ready for you, instead of having to do it myself. But yeah, that's just banter.
Sorry, mate, you have to wait your turn, right? No. Everybody else, you have to wait your turn, mate.
Get in there.
Does it bother you at all that on one side you are a Grand Prix driver, but you're still having to earn your living doing this, like you have done for the last 4 years? Does that bother you? Do you think you should have moved on from this?
It doesn't bother me, no. It'd be nice if you didn't have to and you could just concentrate on going to the gym and all the other activities, but that's the situation I'm in. I feel I'm in a fortunate position. There's another 40 guys out there who are all capable of doing a good job, and they don't get to go and race a Grand Prix car at the weekend.
How long do you envisage you'll carry on doing this for?
Until times when I don't need to do it. It's, I quite enjoy coming and doing this kind of thing, but I guess in a year or 2 years, it just depends on the financial situation of what drive I'm in at the time. The money I earn to live on, to pay the mortgage and pay for food to put on the table is coming from doing this job.
So really, your status hasn't changed from last year to this year?
No, not really, apart from the car race at the weekends is much more sophisticated.
No need to water the surface at Interlagos today. By the way, we've had a couple of excellent F1 weekends. So McLaren, Kimi Raikkonen leading the Drivers' Championship from David Coulthard. Coulthard on the front row today. Then Montoya, we'll be hearing from him shortly. Barrichello, Alonso, Michael Schumacher, no podiums yet this year, Trulli, and Ralf Schumacher. Ralf has had a hurry-up message from the Williams hierarchy. Let's go live to Interlagos. Mark Webber, who's done so well, is with Louise.
Mark, you've just been out around the circuit. What are the conditions like out there?
Well, it's a bit of standing water on the back straight and also coming up to the main straight here, but the problem is spray. It's so hard to see. And because the straights is only one straight, and coming along the kinks here, the spray's very dangerous. So it's starting to rain again, so we'll see.
There were a lot of worries about aquaplaning with the tyres that you've got. Is that more of an issue, or is it the spray that you're most concerned about?
No, aquaplaning's a problem, yeah, because the tyres are designed for a slightly, in terms of aquaplaning, a lot less water on the track. So I think we'll definitely start on a safety car, and then we have to see. But they need to be very, very patient, and they need to look after us today because it's not very safe.
Thanks, Mark.
So hard to see aquaplaning. That's Rubens Barrichello going out. Just explain, Tony, the big difference between intermediate and wet tyres.
Intermediate tyre has got a very, very light and shallow groove cut into the tyre to drive away light surface of rain, and it pushes away to the side. The deeper the groove in the tyre, obviously the more wet it pushes away and the more effective the wet weather tyre is, and that's why they used to have three: the monsoon, the very deep one, and the ordinary wet one as well. And the intermediate, and they talk about the bottom of the valley here, it'd be very, very difficult where the water all gathers together.
I think we can go to Ted Kravitz, who can tell us a bit more about the tyre conditions over there, and it looks as though it's raining very heavily at Interlagos as well. On you go, Ted.
Absolutely, Jim. Not only the tyre conditions, but Not only the tyre conditions, Jim, but also the weather conditions. Just as soon as I've taken my coat off, it starts raining down. You're talking about the intermediate tyres. This is the Bridgestone. It is an intermediate tyre, but if you can have a look, it is quite tightly grooved there. It has got a lot of space for the rain to be pushed out. But on weather such as this, which really is impossible, it's the Michelin tyre which is going to have the advantage. That's because, as you can see here, it resembles one of the more of the rain tyre of old. You might have remembered seeing these when we were allowed different types of rain tyres in the past. It's got much more tread to push out the water out the side. The front two tyres on there, the rear tyres also very similar. I was just talking to Justin Wilson, who has to drive on those intermediate Bridgestones, and he was saying that in Friday practice when he was trying it, about 70 kilometers an hour was really the limit. After that, you start aquaplaning off all over the place. It's not very quick for a motor race, is it?
Ted, how big a doubt is there in your mind about this race starting at all?
If you'd asked me that question about a minute and a half ago, I'd say we would start this under a pace car. A dry line would start to emerge after about, say, 10 laps, 12 laps, and then the pace car would come in. This changes everything. We'll still start under a pace car, make no mistake about that, but it's going to have to go around for many, many laps, and a dry line will have to emerge before we actually go racing for sure. Whatever happens, races only have a 2-hour time limit, so it can only go for 2 hours. And if that 2 hours is entirely behind a pace car, then that's the Brazilian Grand Prix we'll have.
OK, Ted, thank you very much indeed. Well, if the race does go ahead, as we will, of course, hope it does, but the safety of the drivers is absolutely paramount, Tony. There's a nice little Brazilian sequence that Rubens Barrichello is hoping to continue. Tell us about it.
Well, there was a 10-year cycle when we had Emerson Fittipaldi, who was a twice winner, and Nelson Piquet, who was twice winner. There's Emerson Fittipaldi, twice winner. He won in 73. 83, Nelson Piquet, who was a twice winner and 3 times world champion. And then the late, great Ayrton Senna, who won twice as well. 10 years between all those Brazilian wins. And Rubens Barrichello is hoping to make it the next 10 years onto 2003. And he said, the statistics, I've looked at them, and he said, I hope to turn that into a win today.
OK, thank you, Tony. Back to rainy Interlagos, back to Louise, and she's grabbed Jarno Trulli. On you go, Lou.
Extremely rainy Interlagos. It's pouring down again. Now, Jarno, when we had these conditions on Thursday, you were one of the drivers who was very much involved in getting together a petition suggesting that you shouldn't have to go out on the track. What do you think today? Do you think we should start this race?
First of all, we didn't sign a petition to not go out on the track. For sure, we were a little bit concerned about the track condition because we thought it was very dangerous. And again, we feel it's dangerous at the moment. Not because it's raining, but because the drainage of the circuit is not good enough. And obviously, at the moment, I'm a little bit concerned. So I'm sure we will have either a delayed start or a safety car start.
But you would be happy to start with the rain coming down?
Not so much, honestly talking, because as we have seen, there is a lot of spray coming out from the car, out of the car, and especially there is a lot of standing water.
Thanks, Jarno.
A lot of spray, very hard to see. The drivers have been aquaplaning. We're not sure what is going to happen at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Stay with us, you'll be first to know. You normally have umbrellas at Interlagos to keep the sun away. Jean Todt, the Ferrari boss, sheltering under the brolly. Norbert Haug of McLaren joining him there. Remind you, you're watching the build-up to the Brazilian Grand Prix. Should be off in just under a quarter of an hour's time. It has been declared a wet race. There is speculation about whether it will start behind the safety car, whether it will start at all. Tony Jardine with me in London. Tony, spell out the dangers of racing in these sort of conditions.
Well, very acutely aware of them, of course, will be David Coulthard and Michael Schumacher from 1998 at Spa, as we're watching Frentzen taking shelter there. When Michael Schumacher couldn't see through the spray at Spa-Francorchamps and hit the back of the McLaren and lost a front right wheel. We have our own Martin Brundle, who had a huge collision in '89 in Adelaide in blinding wet weather conditions when Senna lost a wheel in the same circumstances. It is extremely dangerous. And as I said before, where the water gathers at the bottom of this circuit in particular, you get huge rivers flowing across. And those tyres cannot cope with this situation. So it's quite embarrassing, really, for Formula One that they don't have the right wet weather tyres.
New viewers joining us all the time, you're all very welcome, of course. Just reiterate the dangers with not having the wet tyres available, Tony, briefly.
Well, they've got these very lightly treaded intermediate tyres. They're only allowed to bring one type of wet weather tyre, and that's for cost-cutting reasons, and that's what they've brought to Interlagos, and those are the conditions that you can see. Very, very, very heavy rain.
To the grid now, and looks a bit like the abominable snowman there. Martin Brundle, on you go.
Hello, Jim. Hello, everybody. Well, we've got a problem. We've got a major problem. You heard Louise and Ted talking about the safety car procedure, and then Ted saying they're going to have to start under the safety car without question, especially here at Interlagos. Look at the concrete walls either side of the pit straight here, and there's always rivers of water running across early on. Cars spin off in here. It's a cul-de-sac. There's nowhere to go other than into the first corner. The marshals can't clear them out of the way. The drivers say they can't see a thing here, and there isn't a car on this grid, with the exception of that safety car, that's got tyres suitable for these conditions, because they're only allowed to bring one wet tyre here, as you've heard. The manufacturers elected crazily to go for Inters, which, if you just know the history of this race here, that was never going to work. We're beginning to wonder how much fuel they got in the safety car, because they might have to refuel that later on. It's really... well, let's see if we can find out what it's like from a driver's point of view. David, I mean, what are you going to do? Do you think you can even scramble around behind the safety car in these conditions?
I think it is very difficult, even behind the safety car. It has a lot of weight and it displaces the water. These Grand Prix cars on these shallow wets, effectively what they are. And this amount of standing water, you can see it's running along the top of the surface. It needs to be very slow.
And the plank underneath, yeah, when you've got this much standing water, turns into a canoe, doesn't it? It starts steering the car, let alone the tyres floating along the surface.
Yeah, it acts like a rudder, so that's one of the things I think will be reviewed for the future. But it's unfortunate because with a normal wet start, I think I could really beat Rubens in the first corner. So in many ways, I'd prefer that. But these conditions, I don't think they've got any choice.
Now, you've been able to change your car unusually. They said that you could make changes because of the extreme conditions. What have you been able to do?
I've been able to add wing, and that's pretty much it. But I commend that decision. That really is a very sensible decision by the FIA to allow us to do that.
Now, what about other problems like your visor misting up and just functioning?
Yeah, it's very difficult to convey to the public just how difficult it is to drive these cars in wet conditions. As you say, visibility is one of the main factors, so it's good to get in front as soon as possible and get a clear track.
Thank you, David. Good luck. I tell you, the guys earn their money today. I'd show you the wet tyres. Ted showed them earlier on, but they're all in their blankets at the moment. Let's see Rubens Barrichello's getting into his car. The water is just running down the pit straight here, and it tends to be one of the better areas because it is on a slope and the water disperses. Let's have a quick word with Ross Braun here. Ross, I mean, how crazy is this going to be now? How confident are you that your car can even handle behind the safety car?
I don't think we could start the race in these conditions. I think it'd be a tough call to start it even behind the safety car, because the problem is at those slow speeds we don't generate any downforce. We just float on top of the water. So surprisingly, behind the safety car it's quite difficult.
Yeah, but they may. I mean, I know in Manicourt a couple of years back they had to ask safety car to slow down. It seems crazy. You've got the finest cars in the world, the best drivers in the world, but they're not designed in this envelope, are they, to have this amount of standing water?
No, there's always a limit. Same with any car. I mean, it'd be dangerous to drive a road car in these conditions. And we're going to drive on the limit. So I think we should wait a little bit so we have a decent race, or else we're going to find a lot of the key competitors out due to incidents and problems.
Where does the buck stop on this wet tyre situation? The team's forced it through, yes, or the tyre manufacturers bought the wrong tyre. You know, who's going to be answering questions tomorrow morning?
Well, unfortunately, it was a cynical attempt by the Michelin runners to change the regulations, and they forced it through in an F1 commission against our wishes and against several Bridgestone runners. And this is the consequence.
OK, thank you for that, Ross. And back to you in the studio.
Well done, Martin. The chance of Rubino coming up from the crowd. Will they start? Won't they start? What will it be like? Stay right here and find out.
race on ITV, sponsored by Toyota.